All right, can you hear me? Too loud? Good? All right, welcome to the So Bitcoin was hijacked, what are we going to do now panel. Here we have Doug, Steve Patterson, the co-author of Hijacking Bitcoin, Sal, and myself. This is going to be a little bit different. This panel isn't just to go over hijacking Bitcoin. Actually, Steve interviewed me, a week or two ago? And we had a long conversation, and it's kind of like, I think most of the people here are probably aware of the fact that Bitcoin was hijacked. I think there are bigger issues involved, namely, what are we going to do about it? So we know what happened, but are we in a position to stop the techniques again? Because now we're in this tent and we're actually talking about promoting privacy coins as an alternative. And there may even be some activities involved in trying to hijack the privacy coin movement. So this is more of an open discussion about, trying to problem solve and figure out how we might address things moving forward. With that said, yeah. Just go over the hijacking Bitcoin briefly. Sure. Sure. Well, Steve, do you want to do a quick overview, maybe just for starters?
Sure. So can you hear me? So the nutshell explanation is there is a critical point of control in Bitcoin, which is the development of the Bitcoin software. So sorry, feels like it's right there. Spitting. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is that better? Okay. Thank you. There is a critical part of the structure of Bitcoin, which can I just can you hear me if I project? No. All right, I feel like this is a little spritzy. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right. Yeah. Okay. So what happened was over the course of, I want to say, roughly 2014 to about 2017, the software development of Bitcoin was effectively taken over. So if you guys don't know, there's one software implementation effectively that creates Bitcoin, or that runs the Bitcoin network, and that's Bitcoin Core. And it's got a market share of like 95, 98%, something like that. And that software is, it's a group of people. They say that it's decentralized, but in practice, it's just like, there's just a social hierarchy. There are the big shots that make the decisions, and there are lessers that do what they say. And so if you're trying to get any code that's actually published in Bitcoin, you have to play along with a kind of social game. So if you want to raise the block size limit, for example, this was the big controversial thing that caused a split in Bitcoin, you have to that has to be accepted by a handful of people that actually make the changes to Bitcoin Core's code. There's only so many people that have, it's called commit access, that have the ability to change or not change Bitcoin Core's code. So this was a central point of control, central point of failure. And so the original, people might not realize this, but the original vision for what Bitcoin is supposed to be is digital cash for the internet. It's supposed to be an alternative currency that you use as a medium of exchange. That was the whole point of the thing. If you read the original white paper, for example, it's the whole thing's about payments and exchange, commerce on the internet. And we saw in this time period a kind of flip where Bitcoin became about a store of value. You're supposed to buy it and hold it and not use it in exchange, which was a kind of a complete inversion of the original design. And I won't go into any of the technical details of what happened, but essentially that's what everybody here is going to mean by Bitcoin's hijacking. Is it's not supposed to be a medium of exchange. It's this thing that you buy and you don't even actually own the keys for it. You like BlackRock will hold your keys for you. And so you don't have ownership over your own money, which was... Talking about the ETF now? That's one aspect of it. So I don't think the hijacking happened way before any of the ETFs. But I'd say the present version, I think we all agree, like the present version of Bitcoin, it's not a challenge to the monetary system. It's not a challenge to the financial establishment. It's just like an asset you buy and you hold on to. And so I'm not very optimistic that this is going to like increase freedom in the world. And so that's where we are. This is the story that in great detail is documented in the book Hijacking Bitcoin, if you're interested in that.
So what tactics would you say were used to effectively hijack Bitcoin? How did they do it?
Well, it was a social attack. So this is what libertarians like myself are totally incompetent at, recognizing what's happening socially in a group dynamics. And so because there's a small group of people who have GitHub access, who can change the code, all you have to do is corrupt that group of people or get them on board with a project that, in this case, stands opposed to the original design. So it's almost entirely social. There is a technical side of things, but I'd say the attack was almost completely social and perhaps political. There are, as we talk about in the book, there are connections to US intelligence. And one of the Bitcoin Core developers is a guy named Peter Todd. He had his emails leaked at one point. He was having extensive conversations with a gentleman who self-identified as being high up in intelligence. So, yeah, social.
So social and political, and also during the process, there were a lot of censorship and propaganda used, would you say?
Oh yes, very much so. So again, I don't want to just make this about the hijacking Bitcoin. There was mass censorship online. There still is to a lesser extent, but people who were dissenting from the narrative of what Bitcoin is supposed to be, they were banned from the major online forums. It turned out that one individual whose pseudonym is famous happened to control the r Bitcoin subreddit, which was the most popular platform for people talking about Bitcoin, and also bitcointalk.org, which was the most popular forum by far of people talking about Bitcoin. They happened to be controlled by the same individual who also decided, and he actually, this is a quote in the book where he essentially says, look, I know what I'm doing is censoring, but I've been involved in community management for a long time. I know what I'm doing. I know how censorship affects people, and I'm going to do it anyway for the good of Bitcoin. That's a paraphrase, but that's actually in the book. He said that aloud.
So the ends justify the means.
Right.
So we have propaganda, we have censorship, we have a social attack, we have a political attack. So we now know that. Although we know that, most of the world does not know that. And I know this isn't about rehashing the entirety of hijacking Bitcoin, but I do workshops all over the country and increasingly all over the world to talk about the threat of CBDCs. Most people have no idea that the purpose of Bitcoin was to be used as digital cash. They've never heard of that concept. They only think of it as a speculative investment. That's how profound the hijacking has been, and the propaganda and the censorship. So now that we know that, what are we going to do about it? Because I think we're seeing this start to emerge again in the privacy community. Doug, do you want to talk about that?
I'm just over here digesting my double smash burger with fried egg that I purchased with Monero, of course, with Monero. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little too early to say that, we're seeing Monero potentially get hijacked here, but I think we need to be very vigilant and learn from the mistakes, learn from what happened in Bitcoin. I think the primary tool or thing we can do is to have a cohesive culture. I know that's hard to say, and it might sound like, well, these things shouldn't have cultures. I mean, as long as your culture is kind of like very simple and defined and open-ended to where essentially anybody can participate in it. And that culture being one of everybody involved in Monero, for example, that's using Monero, that's building on Monero, that's developing Monero, is in it for purposes of building unstoppable digital cash. And make that the mantra, and everybody agree to that. With Bitcoin, obviously it started as digital cash, but they lost that mantra. Monero, I think, has proven to have a very strong community, and there's all sorts of people using Monero. You have people on the complete left, people on the complete right. I'm dealing with them. But where there is agreement, there's agreement upon the fact of, hey, people I disagree with are going to use this. People I agree with, they're going to use this. But what I do agree is we need a tool that no government or corporation can co-opt or control, that can be used for people to send money peer-to-peer without surveillance or without censorship. And I think that's how we really win, is by just continuing to build that culture and all unify around that.
I did want to ask you a question on this. So the fact that you're representing Monero is very appropriate here, because if there's any hope for crypto to actually be used as an alternative currency, I think Monero and privacy coins look very promising. But there's a catch. Almost nobody outside of diehard libertarians and criminals care. It appears to me. I wouldn't have said this some years ago, but it appears to me that 99.9% of the crypto industry is about the price. 99.9 all around the world, people just want to make money. They want to buy Bitcoin. They want the price to go up. And that's kind of it. And I don't want to say that's good or bad. Okay. Okay, it's bad. All right. It's a fact. So what do we do with that fact? If that's correct, then it's not clear to me that Monero or other awesome projects are going to be particularly attractive or relevant for most people. Like, are we in a circumstance where that dream of like Bitcoin being the Trojan horse, this is what we used to talk about many, many years ago, is, oh, hey, we've got this awesome Bitcoin technology and it's like better than credit cards. And you got low fees, practically instant transactions, and people are going to use it and the price will go up. And then, well, it's like a Trojan horse because you can't inflate the money supply. And so people are going to be sort of onboarded to hard money because it's going to be so useful in commerce. Well, that ship has sailed because crypto, relative to credit cards or relative to stable coins, most of crypto really isn't as practical anymore. So why are people going to buy it other than libertarians?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay that people are going to buy it out of a real world need, right? And right now, people don't realize that they have that need. Those that do realize are using it, right? People on the dark market. They have a real, whether you agree with what happens there, they have a real need to use a tool where they're not going to get caught if they're buying something or they're receiving. That's why they've adopted Monero, right? So now you just need the next wave of people realizing what value and utility you can get out of transacting with a currency that the government can't surveil, that the government can't censor. And you're going to see growing use cases for it. You're going to see fringe political groups start to use it. We're seeing that in Monero. Whether you agree with them or not, they're using it. There's a use case. It's showing adoption. So I think as more people realize these use cases, they'll start to see it, and they're going to realize more of these use cases because on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a growing surveillance technocratic state, right? That's growing in power. We're seeing Palantir grow. And when people start to really feel it, right? When they get letters from the IRS about things they may have done, when they get letters from various agencies, or when they get debanked, or when they're trying to do something on the internet and they're not allowed to do it, there's going to be these realizations, and that's when they're going to go find the tool.
We've been locked in this war on crypto since they arrested Ross, and then it's just gotten worse and worse and worse over time. So I don't know. I just feel like the only possible solution to this point is privacy coins. As the state gets increasingly oppressive, like they're caught in a liquidity trap right now, and they have to. The choice is either print more money and we wind up in hyperinflation, or stop printing money and we have this terrible recession. So they're like a fish out of water, and as they get more and more desperate, they're going to become increasingly oppressive. And as the noose tightens around their neck, the demand for a peer-to-peer currency is going to increase, and eventually people will realize that these pseudonymous chains don't provide the protection that they're looking for, and they're going to be forced into options like Monero and Zano and Firo and all the other privacy coins out there.
Can I ask you a question on that? Sorry, go ahead. All right. So we've seen for example, I think it's in South Korea, there are privacy, and in Japan as well, the privacy coins are just banned. Like, you're not allowed to buy them, you're not allowed to trade them. So in practice, imagine that happens in the States. Do you think that most people, not talking about the diehards or people who are okay operating outside the law, do you think they're going to be like, I'm going to take the risk anyway, I'm going to use privacy coins?
No, not at all. Most people are pussies, but here's the bottom line. As long as I don't have to fund the genocide in Palestine, I'm happy. I've often said, I don't care if the price is $1 or $1 million. As long as there's an option for me to not fund what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, or what, Nancy Pelosi's latest trade, I'm happy. That's all I care about. You can't convince the rest of the world to be free. I mean, as individuals and voluntaries, why would we want to force our will on other people? You want to be a debt slave to the banking cartel and the Israeli Nasset? God bless. I don't have anything to do with that. So I'm just grateful that there are options and alternatives like the solutions that we're talking about for me out there to opt out of that. So at least I can sleep at night. I don't have blood in my hands like most people do.
So my wife and I have been going around the country doing these workshops, and we've been warning people about CBDCs and trying to show them how to use cryptocurrency as an alternative. And mostly the target audience is not our normal libertarian crowd or crypto crowd. There's a real opening post-COVID of people that were surprised, taken aback by COVID tyranny, that have now started to ask questions. They've started to ask questions about the Federal Reserve. They've been debanked themselves. In fact, people in the health freedom category, food freedom category, that entire censorship has opened people's eyes, and they're actually looking for solutions. I've actually found it's easier to onboard people that have never had a cryptocurrency before than it is to somebody who's already, bought into with religious cult-like fervor a particular bag that they've married. So to me, we're not going to get mainstream right away. Nothing ever goes to mainstream right away. We have to be strategic about targeting market segments where we are going to get early adopters. And to me, those are those segments where there's a newly found understanding of why sound money is important.
Canadian truckers, people who've been oppressed by the government and have had their financial sovereignty stolen from them by political parasites.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't act like defeatists, right? And we frame it correctly, right? Privacy is a human right. Cash is a human right. The ability to develop open source code, the ability to send data peer to peer using encryption, and we don't let them win on that ground. We don't like, oh, what if they make it illegal? Well, all right, so now they're just going to ignore the Constitution. They're going to ignore all these. Yeah, I mean, you could say these what ifs, but we need to be out there framing it for what it is. That Monero completely aligns with the ideals of free and open and democratic societies, especially the U.S., the great U.S. of A. If it stands for anything, Monero completely aligns with the ideals this country was founded upon, and we need to be out there beating that drum so we can normalize this tool. They're going to eliminate cash, right? We need a cash replacement. Everybody's used to cash being normal and part of society. We can't let them take that away from us and now let them frame cash as a tool that's only used for illegal things.
Okay, so outside of privacy coins, is there anything else? So I'm not coming down on privacy coins. I think they're awesome. I guess I'm sort of asking the question to myself, because I've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and it's kind of heartbreaking. We're like, yeah, Bitcoin's not it. Does Bitcoin Cash have the same problems? Or does every other project other than privacy coins, are they kind of dead in the water with regards to making people actually freer?
Sort of. I mean, yeah, if it's a pseudonymous chain, then yeah. But a lot of these like coins, like Bitcoin Cash, for example, has like if you use Stack Wallet, it has like a built-in CoinJoin is just sort of built, or Cash Fusion is just built into Stack Wallet. So they're going to come up with more and more solutions, but really you're looking for that base layer privacy, that sort of guarantee. Everything else is sort of like an add-on kind of solution.
Well, I think one of the things we have to do is warn people about the threat of stable coins, because stable coins have become a backdoor CBDC. And the Genius Act was just passed, I think, yesterday. And so the same people that were, protesting against Klaus Schwab and the WEF last year are now cheering on effectively the exact same thing when it's rebranded as a stable coin. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us to explain why these stable coins are essentially adding CBDC level surveillance while at the same time funding all of this debt from this big, beautiful bill and all of the wars that we're expanding into. So there's an education component to it. On the plus side, people are adopting stable coins. So in other words, it's not as though getting people to use privacy coins is a big leap technologically. If people are already starting to use stable coins, which I believe there was $27 trillion worth of transactions on stable coins last year, not necessarily P2P purchases, but people are starting to get accustomed to using stable coins, which should make it easier to switch, provided we can make privacy coins as easy to use as traditional finance and stable coins, which is actually the critical component.
These people went from a no kings protest to nationalizing stable coins. I mean, you can't make it up. And the answer, of course, is Freedom Dollar, which is like the first decentralized stable coin built in a private blockchain. So right now, the way I see it, and maybe you guys can add on, but like there's two groups who use stable coins, right? There's merchants who want to avoid volatility, like they have overhead, they got staff, they got to keep the lights on. They don't want, if they accept crypto payments, that crypto can fluctuate, so they have to pay their bills, so they opt into stable coins. And the second is traders who want to go switch in and out like from crypto very easily on an exchange. All of those people are going to be forced into these surveillance chains, like when Genius and Stable transform Tether and Circle into CBDCs. Those people will have no choice but to move into a decentralized private alternative. And right now, the only game in town is Freedom Dollar, which is built on the Zeno blockchain. And one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Zeno.
Yeah, so the Freedom Dollar is really interesting. I don't know as much about it. It's definitely kind of an interesting mix of stablecoin with privacy coin. I do think that stablecoins in the future, and I'm sort of thinking in hindsight, maybe this was the point of what happened with Bitcoin, is you just delay long enough until you have technology that can compete. Because I was around in the early BitPay days where there was actually for a few years, was really hard with credit cards. Like it was actually clunkier than it is. There wasn't Zelly, there wasn't, PayPal was a thing, but it was also, you got to get approval. So there was like a little window where Bitcoin was just better for online payments. That window has passed, and now there are a bunch of regulations which make it very cumbersome even to pay for things in Bitcoin, because you gotta sign up, and then it's a mess compared to what it used to be. So I think stablecoins are the future because compliance is going to be a lot easier. You don't have to deal with volatility, and I suspect that if I put my scheming hat on 10 years ago, I think, where are we going? Well, obviously, Bitcoin as an alternative currency was a possible challenge to the dominance of the US dollar. Like, that's one of the most powerful things in the world, the dominance of the US dollar. So the chance that like they're just going to let that happen and not try to infiltrate is kind of crazy. Yeah, it's like exactly. So I'm thinking, okay, if I were a schemer, what would I try to do? You just delay. You delay until, listen, you can use crypto. Crypto's awesome. We love crypto, guys. It's the future. And it's a stable coin. It's the US dollar in crypto form. It's literally just the dollar that's packaged a little bit differently. So I don't want to be pessimistic, but at present, given what I have personally seen and the direction of this industry, I still do think that crypto's the future, the US dollar is the future, and it's going to be stable coins. That's what we're looking at. And maybe the Freedom Dollar on Zeno, maybe that carves out an interesting niche where you can have the best of both worlds, but we'll see. I hope.
Yeah, we'll have stable coins, but are they freedom stable coins or are they tyrannical stable coins? That's actually the only question at this point. And I think that's clearly where we are from an adoption perspective. And related to the hijacking, there's no doubt that the intention was to delay, because at some point, this group out of MIT started funding the development of Bitcoin. And that same group went on to fund all 3 US CBDC pilots. And there are even Bitcoin Core developers that have worked on US CBDC pilots. This guy, Corey Fields, who was an early developer, was the co-author of Project Hamilton, which was the US retail CBDC pilot program. So when this narrative shifted, all of a sudden people are saying digital gold, not digital cash, while at the same time, the US went full steam ahead on developing a CBDC. Now they found a new clever way to take popular stablecoins that are already being used and put it under control of the federal government and the Federal Reserve.
Well, I mean, look, if just think about practically, if you guys had a monopoly on the issuance of currency, would you give it up peacefully? Of course not. Who the hell, if you had a money printer, why would, and someone came to take it from you, yeah, you would fight to the death. So, and it's just illogical, it's irrational for us to expect a cartel of banks to just voluntarily cede that power. That's why we have the war on crypto. And the first shot across the bow was the arrest of Ross Ulbricht. And today we have guys like Roger Ver who are being persecuted for the same exact reason. But it's just a continuance of the same battle, the same war. It's an attempt to protect the banking cartel's monopoly on the money printer.
Just want to quickly shill and thank the sponsors, because without them we wouldn't be in this tent here and have this major impact that we're having on PorcFest. So thank you to Cake Wallet. Major thank you to Cake Wallet. Steve is blocking. Steve, if you can move your chair back without falling off the platform, please do. Cake Wallet, always super generous with us, and so many of my projects would not be possible but for Cake. Xano is also a big sponsor, and Confidential Layer. Those are three that really help make this privacy tech happen. So just want to shill that and get that in there.
Do you get the impression that Monero is going to be running into regulatory issues in the US like it has in some places in Asia?
Right now with the Trump administration, no, that's not like the signaling I'm picking up. I'm seeing the opposite. I feel like Europe is heading in that direction, and I feel like Trump is taking things in the opposite direction with regards to crypto, being able to use it. I mean, Trump on day one, for better or worse, launched his own meme coin, right? So if you if you could pump your own meme coin and completely ignore the SEC, and it's like cat's out of the bag. People are allowed to do whatever they want with their crypto. He then also put out an executive order, right, really early in his term, where he basically said, the White House and the federal government has this goal mandate of essentially supporting true open source crypto technologies, true public ledgers, and Monero fits right into that. So I do think that there's promise there. Now, I don't know what's going to happen next administration. But right now, I think the environment is towards more leniency with regards to privacy tech. We're seeing that, even with some of the cases against these mixers, right? The Tornado Cash guys, the Samurai Wallet guys. We're seeing some of the pressure being let off by the U.S. government.
And sorry, I don't know if you have the answer to this question, so I don't want to put you on the spot. You mentioned that in Europe, there's more pressure against privacy coins and Monero. Are you connected to like the people in the crypto world in the European culture? Do you get the impression that there's pushback, or is it like
we're actually streaming? This is being streamed live right now in Prague at MoneroCon.
Okay,
actually. So what's up, guys? What's up, MoneroCon? As I hope they got the stream up. So yeah, we're definitely connected over there with them. And your question is, do I have a sense that?
Yeah, so I ask because I could imagine a situation where in the U.S. a lot of people back down from using privacy coins if the government says don't use them. There's going to be a subset of people. A lot of people here are going to say, go F yourself. We're going to use privacy coins. And I wonder if you have any read on what the situation you imagine would be like in Europe as they're rolling out more regulations.
Well, I think there is a strong cypherpunk crypto anarchist liberty community throughout Europe, right? A lot of mainstream Europe is gone completely woke and whatnot, but there's an undercurrent of strong pushback. Some of the people that were involved in the early days of crypto, I'm sure, coming out of places like Germany and whatnot. There's a strong Monero presence, I would say, in Germany, in France. The conference is happening in Czech, in Prague. So I do think even if made completely illegal, there'll still be a strong user base that's not going anywhere. I mean, the real goal with Monero is if the governments were to ban it around the world, that it would still be usable, and not just in terms of not being able to stop the network, but being able to onboard and offboard in a decentralized manner using decentralized exchanges. So completely ignoring the KYC systems, not having to worry about having access to Coinbase or Bitstamp or whatever, and just being able to access decentralized exchanges, move in from your Bitcoin into Monero or Litecoin, whatever it may be. And at that point, there's really nothing they can do in terms of stopping people's access.
So I just got back from ETHDAM, the conference in Amsterdam, and there's like a dramatic difference. Like in Europe, the feeling is like one of like not like impending doom, but like they really do feel the heat of regulation much more intensely than we do here. And I think it's too burdensome here. But you know, Alexei Pertsev from Tornado Cash was there, and he did like what 10 months in prison or something like that, Aaron. Like he did time, and like they might even send him back. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy. And I was talking to his lawyer, and yeah, it's just the whole situation is just a mess in Europe. But when has it not been a mess in Europe, frankly?
For the EU, I think we should be as worried, if not more worried here, simply because if you look at the stable bill and the genius bill, and even the rhetoric around it, it is all about compliance. It's all about KYC. It's all about anti-money laundering laws. I haven't actually seen anything that's been particularly pro-privacy. Even the comments from the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary are about, we need to build a digital dollar that is compliant and that is secure. So that's all their rhetoric.
Right.
I haven't seen a single thing that's been pro-privacy. So we're about to capture $27 trillion worth of adoption and make it fully compliant. So,
you know, if Donald Trump was really pro crypto, he would be, you know, you can't call yourself pro crypto because you know, launch an NFT, rug pull your fan base, and you allowed the Hawk Tuah girl to, you know, do a meme coin or something like that. That's not pro crypto. Let me know when you stop the persecution of Roman Storm or Ian Freeman or Roger Ver. Then I'll consider you to be pro crypto.
Yeah, no, I agree with those notions. But I think if anything, that will make privacy coins like Monero more attractive, right? If the government isn't looking to implement privacy into their stable coins, Monero becomes more attractive. And I don't think the U.S. government is going to move in those steps, right? So they're always going to want to be able to track, trace, make it compliant. So if anything, that could make things like Monero more attractive as a utility to compete against those forms of money.
That's definitely a possibility. And I've been thinking for some time, on what circumstance is going to get average people actually using crypto as currency? And I can't think of many scenarios, but I suppose one would be if you really do have something like a currency crisis or an extreme enough situation where people are practically they're not ideologues. They're just practically looking for an alternative way to pay people. We saw this many years ago when there was a banking crisis in Cyprus. Gosh, I don't know when this was, 2014, 2015, something like that. It was a long time ago. And the Bitcoin price spiked up because there was a bunch of buying from people in Cyprus who couldn't access their funds with the banks. And so they were like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to
like shave 10% off of everybody's like savings account.
Yeah, it started 10%.
Yeah.
It might have even gone up north from that. But that was a situation where you go, okay, that's like real world adoption for utility. So I do wonder if there are bans of privacy coins, if that's sort of a signal that, look, if you actually want privacy and you want some separation of money and state, what are the coins that are being banned? Because that might imply they can't control them or they're effective. So I guess that's a possible future as well.
Streisand effect for sure.
So I was just in I was at the Bitcoin Cash Blitz conference in Slovenia, and I was talking to this guy. He was like an activist from Palestine, and he was telling me how they're using privacy coins in Palestine to transact behind the IDF's back. And I'm like, man, that's the dream right there. You know what I mean? Like, if we can do that in every one of these areas where people are oppressed, we would win the day. Again, I'm not really concerned about convincing the average fluoride drinker out there. Most people who got their television on 24/7, they're watching Fox News and CNN. There's no hope for these people. It's a lost fucking cause, guys. I mean, there's no chance of saving half these people. But you have to let them go. The key is you can only save yourself, right? Like, liberty exists internally. It's not something that like some politician can give you or some banker can give you. It's like something that you have to claim within yourself. You know what I mean? So once you make that decision that you are not a slave to the banking cartel or to the Israeli Nasset, then it's up to you to take charge of your own life. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to use privacy coins and the tools that these guys are always talking about.
I love the idea and I love the sentiment. It just sucks because there was a bigger goal at one point. There really was. Like the idea of saying, screw the masses, they're a bunch of idiots, I'm sympathetic with. In 2025, there was a window where it was like, hey, this technology is so amazing. Maybe people will use it and they won't even realize, those dummies, that they're signing up for hard money, right? And it's very hard for me, at least, to give up that vision. I don't know if we're there. We're probably there yet, but it is very hard for me to accept that.
So like when I got into Bitcoin, I was literally just like some broke kid in college in like 2013 or whatever it was. And I was like, I'm just tired of the bank overdrafting my account every time like I buy a pizza or something like that. So I'm like, if I use Bitcoin, they can't overdraft my account. And obviously it was the best decision I ever made in my life. But it's like, you know, if people just think that way, and like if you think about the amount of sovereignty and freedom it gives you as an individual, like that's the true power of P2P cash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the frightening thing is we've gone from Bitcoin being something that could actually separate money and state to that technology being used to implement a technocratic agenda.
Opposite.
So I think we need to do more to explain to people what technocracy is about. That what we're talking about here is a complete shift to a world where elites pick scientists and engineers to make decisions for us. It's literally the end of free will. And so CBDCs or hijacked, or excuse me, backdoor CBDCs in the form of stablecoins are just a gateway to social credit systems, vaccine passports, and all of that. And in fact, there's been a plan to do this for about 90 years. And I think people are unaware because they hear the rhetoric. Oh, this is about convenience. This is about lowering fees. In fact, today I saw MasterCard and Visa stock collapsed because or not collapsed, but dropped pretty significantly because of the Genius Act. So we need to do a better job of waking people up on what exactly technocracy is, because that's a profound threat.
All they hear on Fox News is that how the Genius Bill is going to make America the leader in cryptocurrencies, and we're going to be the #1 nation now, and all this nonsense. But it's actually the exact opposite, and it's really just a plot to enslave all of us.
I will also quickly shill XMR Bazaar just because. Are you aware of XMR Bazaar? Okay. So it's a Monero-based peer-to-peer marketplace. So, you know, it relates to this concept of, well, how do we get people to actually use it? People are using XMR Bazaar for legal goods and services in their jurisdiction. All transactions are Monero-based, goes through the Monero network. XMR Bazaar never touches your Monero. But we're seeing some real world adoption there. I mean, it makes sense to use it, right? It's like when you go to farmer's market, you're not using credit card, you're using cash, right? People see value in cash. If I'm selling honey, I probably don't want to go and use Venmo and credit card and lose fees. I want to sell my honey for cash. So now you can sell your honey for digital cash on XMR Bazaar, and people are seeing value in the ability to do that.
Any connection to Open Bazaar, I wonder?
I mean, by name only, but
okay,
yeah, it's not. The technology is different. We have Monero multi-sig built into it.
Right on. I just asked because that was my brother was working on that project.
Right,
Sam
and I was so excited about it when it was being worked on, and you know, for various reasons, it failed really because
a little ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was ahead of its time, and Bitcoin wasn't really built or ready to be used as a transactional currency. Fees were too high.
Right, and not to air dirty laundry, but it's funny you mentioned that because I had forgotten about this. There was this cool project called Open Bazaar. My brother will get a kick out of mentioning this. And it was essentially what you're describing, like a P2P marketplace. And they were like very ideologically aligned with everybody here. And originally it was just accepting Bitcoin. And then as a marketplace, you know, fees matter, transaction fees matter. So when the transaction fees went way up, they said, okay, well, we have to open up the marketplace to more coins now because, you know, people aren't going to want to spend $30 on a transaction fee to buy a sticker for $5. That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, they opened it up and they started accepting more coins, and instantly, talk about culture, instantly, they got shit on. The crypto community was like, this is, you remember this? They're like, you guys are sellouts. What are you doing? It should be Bitcoin only. So culture really does matter, because you had like this amazing ideal project of not only are we going to have peer-to-peer cash, but we're also going to have a peer-to-peer marketplace, and it's going to be decentralized. But we saw if it didn't go along with the narrative of it's Bitcoin only, then that culture started attacking even a critical project like that. And so the project ultimately failed. So we don't have Open Bazaar because it didn't take off. So that's a happy story.
Yeah, another happy story. But in addition to XMR Bazaar, there's a Xano Bay on Xano. So there's also a P2P marketplace there. And another promising thing is Confidential Layer, which allows you to bridge your Bitcoin Cash, or Ethereum into Xano, and so you get the privacy and the low fees. And so I think that's another solution that'll help spur adoption in a big way.
Let me also draw attention to another project that's really promising is Firo. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Firo. It's like a lot bigger, maybe in like Europe and Asia right now, but it's very similar to Xano. It has instead of how Xano has aliases that you can use, Firo has Spark names, and same way they have Confidential Layer on Xano, Firo has Spark assets. So we have all these different solutions out there for you guys to use. Like at this point, I hate to say it, but like if you're still funding the genocide in Gaza, it's on you at this point, because the tools exist out there for us to all opt out. So the choice is yours. Do you want to pay for Benjamin Netanyahu to slaughter 20,000 children in 6 months or not? And if you don't, then you can opt out. The tools are there. Monero, Xano, Firo, Zcash, whatever. Use Bitcoin for all I care. Use whatever you can possibly use. You can use gold and silver. Just don't use US dollars, because that's how you fund the welfare warfare machine. And the imprisonment of all of our friends and the people who've been persecuted in the war on crypto.
And yeah, I think it's important for the Monero community to pick up on these things. Like as I said, the culture is pretty amazing, right? If we use it, we win. The original branding of Monero, I don't know if you guys remember, was "Don't use Monero." Yeah. Don't buy Monero. I'm sorry, I totally ruined that. It was "Don't buy Monero." It was a warning. It looked like a cigarette case, right? And it was like Monero may harm the financial surveillance system. Yeah. So we got to stick with that. But to what you said, right, with Open Bazaar, and then people became maxis with it. We need to be open to these other technologies and not just boot them out of our camp. Let them in, let them come and talk about their tech and talk about the things that they're doing. That's what we try to do at Monerotopia all the time. And we do get some flack for it, because there are maxis out there. I mean, even today, because we were talking about Xano, I'm getting like on X, everybody, Tuman sold out to Xano. You mentioned Firo. I mean, Firo, we have participating in Monerotopia. What I like about Firo is they've contributed in very real ways to the privacy tech space. They're the ones that kind of pushed. Monero ultimately didn't implement Seraphis, but they were like the leaders in that. And Monero was going to implement that technology. There's things that Xano has done with inventing private proof of stake. So you got to, you shouldn't be dismissive to these other projects. I'm not saying go invest in them, but, be respectful at least of the people that are working on them and the communities that are excited about them. Because overall, the community of people that actually care about digital cash is very small. So if we're then going to divide it among 100 different communities within that, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
I also like the strategy of conceding the price game. Okay, because I think what's going on is people want to make money. So they go, oh, Monero, that's crappy. It's Xano's where it's at. Or no, Xano, that's crappy. Firo, oh no, that's Bitcoin. Or they have their pet project. And why do they say that? Because they want to make money. So if we can just concede, listen, not talking about financial investment at all. Not talking about the price is going to go up. We're just talking about transactions with peer-to-peer cash. I'm cool conceding that territory. I think that's actually an effective tactic, because also it sort of segments people. Look, if you want to have the conversation about price, fine, but there's another conversation that we should be having. Somebody, it's cool. Yeah, it's cool if you want to just use it as a speculative vehicle, that's fine. But there were definitely people back in the day that cared about peer-to-peer cash. And maybe that's a way we can find them and work on the same project or coordinate on the same project. Is okay, we're just going to stay poor. The price is going to go down. That sucks. But maybe we should talk again about peer-to-peer cash.
One thing I found is that if you try to get rich, you're probably not gonna. But if you try to get free, the money actually follows, because those coins actually have utility. So I didn't get into Bitcoin to be rich. I just wanted to stop paying overdraft fees, but you make money. And then Ethereum comes along and you're like, oh my God, smart contracts. We can disintermediate the courts. So you make a little bit of money in that, and then they have ICOs, and then NFTs, and then you have privacy coins. And if you try to again, if you just try to get rich, you're probably not going to. But if you try to get free, the money usually does follow.
Yeah, and it's good. It is good to focus on utility. I mean, the worst thing could ever happen is if you had, a Kardashian shilling Zano or shilling Monero. Then all of a sudden you'd have people that are in it for the wrong reasons,
Right.
and then the focus would only be on the pump. So I think that's a good insight.
Yeah.
Want to open it up?
Sure. Let's see how far. Are you happy to open this up for questions? Well, I mean, we don't have a hard stop actually, so there's nothing after this. But who wants to? You want to go first?
I want to just push slightly back on the notion of that only criminals and libertarians care about privacy, because with like some real life stats, we have like Shop and Bit, Proxy Store, Coin Cards, Cake Pay, and a few others that show that the volume you can like pay in Bitcoin or in Monero or Lightning sometimes, and sometimes even stable coins for coin cards speaking. And Monero is up there coming when we look at the volume with Bitcoin, and even like is above it. So yeah, that's what you wouldn't be expecting if you like think people don't care about privacy. So I think that might be
Yeah, but don't forget Bitcoin doesn't work though.
So that's awesome. I hope I'm wrong. Like, I hope you're totally correct in that. That's wonderful to hear. I wonder though, of the percentage of people that are using Monero in that way, how many of them are libertarians? Like
the majority, probably yes.
Right. So I feel like that is also how it used to be in the early days of Bitcoin. People were using it practically to buy things, but it was overwhelmingly still those of us with a libertarian bent. But I hope that trend continues, because that's awesome to hear.
Maybe a little insight from a German friend of mine who's working in like growing crypto adoption, and he holds like talks for entrepreneurs in Germany, and some of them who aren't like libertarian, but more like they lean this direction without really knowing about it, and they are also interested in Monero, like because when they like get informed about like Bitcoin and the transparency, and then they see like Monero with the privacy, and it's not hard to use, so you don't need like technical knowledge to use Monero and be private.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask a very basic question, because I haven't followed this in some time. Back in the day, you used to have to download a fully validating Monero wallet to use it. Is that still the case? Are there light clients for Monero? Are there?
Okay. There's like, for example, Edge Wallet that
Okay.
has like a view key, and they do the syncing for you. Or
Okay, so you're using
Yes.
their node.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
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 Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And
That's great.
And
That's
there's
good.
an improvement coming for Monero that you can like give up a key without sacrificing much of privacy to speed up the syncing considerably.
Okay, and I have no problem with like the SPV concept in Bitcoin Cash or like the original Bitcoin. So I only ask because we have to have the payment process easy. And if you got to download, like I have an old Monero wallet I was playing around with years ago, and it was like you got to wait for the you got to download 10,000 blocks or whatever. That's never going to take off. So I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, exactly. We can just repeat the question. So yeah.
It strikes me that the problem of how do you prevent this project from being hijacked is like it's very similar to like our political system. You know, like how do you stop like the politicians are the ones with right access to the repo, right? Like how do we ensure that the only people in that group are people who are more motivated by the principles of the project than they are by getting rich serving the interests of the old guard. And so I think this is a really hard it's a really hard problem to solve, and if we solve it, you're potentially solving a lot of other things. So.
Yeah. So the question / statement is, we need to try to solve this problem of how do you deal with the fact that you have groups that are centralized working on these projects. Like there are Monero developers, there are Xano developers. So you're always going to have this social hijacking threat. That's completely true. And like you said, if you could solve that problem, you could probably solve a bunch of other problems.
Any project, you know, if it scales big enough to approach kind of mainstream,
Yeah.
it's gonna be under threat of
I think here's one attempt at trying to answer that. Perhaps if one wants to be pessimistic, you could say it's a matter of time before a successful enough project gets hijacked if they're doing important work. I think that's possible. And so it could be sort of like an eternal game of cat and mouse. So if Monero goes and then maybe that was infiltrated, maybe there's another project that will spring up, small group of people who are ideological, and then that one goes and then you switch to another project. I think that perhaps in practice, that's one way of trying to deal with this is you go, okay, look, this is probably going to be hijacked. The stakes are too high. So let's not put all of our chips in one basket.
It's a good comparison because I think the answer is sort of similar. It's like you have to opt out. Just same way, like same thing with the political system. And like this is what we say in agorism is like, stop participating. Just stop participating in their system because then you're just lending it legitimacy by participating. You're giving the system consent by going out and voting and participating in the process. And the same exact thing is true in the financial realm. Stop using dollars. Like that's the solution is like to stop using their currency and start using alternative currencies.
But I think within the currencies, I think what we're doing here is actually a good start. The fact that we have this Monerotopia tent that also has Zeno and has all of these other projects in it. The fact that across the way we have Pirate Chain, we have people from Pirate Chain here, and we all talk to each other. We all have a common theme. We're all interested in privacy, and we're all interested in understand the threat of CBDCs and technocracy. We need to keep the discussion going, and we need to do whatever we can to avoid this turning into toxic maximalism, because that's been a big part in addition to deep state and other infiltration. So hopefully this event is a good way of kicking some of that off.
I had a question for the panel about if regarding the banning or shadow banning or both of privacy coins, what you think is more likely, because I kind of have the opinion that if there is an outright ban, then they're kind of bringing more attention, like you had mentioned before, as to that it's effective. And so do you think that it's more likely that there's more likely going to be like a shadow banning of it's just going to be, they're going to try to make it difficult to use, but it's not going to be outright banned? And I wanted to get your opinion on that.
That was one of the problems with Monero for a long time, is that they were so heavily censored because it actually worked so well. And that was one of the big challenges to like retail adoption. I think we're kind of overcoming that, right? We're kind of moving past that. We have so many options and alternatives now and decentralized exchanges. And I mean, Zeno has a DEX built right into the wallet. I mean, it doesn't get any easier than that. I mean, it literally does not get any easier than that. So, I mean, those problems are sort of kind of like a thing of the past. Like, and you're right, if they blacklist us, then it just draws attention to the privacy realm and brings more, users our way, frankly.
Yeah, I think if the question is about what we do as crazy libertarian people, like, I think there's always going to be some way we can opt out. I think there's a lot of eccentrics that are going to figure out some way to get it done. If the question is in terms of the rest of the country, like, could this be a countrywide thing and libertarians are going to do their own thing? But like, are we actually on the path for the US to ban something like Monero? My guess is probably yes, only because we've seen this in other countries, or a de facto ban where it will be so incredibly hard to use it in commerce. The only people that will be accepting it in commerce are on, the dark web, or they're ideologically motivated. So I guess I would put an asterisk by that. If Monero continues to grow and continues to be relevant and people are using it, at some point it's going to be big enough where I suspect they're going to try to intervene in some way. That's my guess, but I don't know.
I mean, I think they already are trying to ban it in Europe pretty explicitly. And I certainly would expect them to try to ban it here. But I think more importantly, we're fighting a technocracy that does not allow for the coexisting of other systems. So, I mean, technocracy is a take it or leave it proposition. So to me, it's really important that we actually make these privacy related projects easy to use so that they can be adopted by normies. That is still a limitation. There is a limitation on point of sale systems. There's still a limitation in usability. So that absolutely critically has to be worked out if we're going to be able to compete.
That's a great point. And think about it practically speaking, if you want to accept a stable coin. So you like the idea of the freedom dollar and you're cool with libertarians and buying stuff at your store. In practice, there's a risk even accepting something that might be considered illegal. So like you've got a farm and you've got different ways that you can pay. How do you let your potential customers know, by the way, you can also pay me in these dark coins and nobody's going to track them. Like that's cool, but that's also a risk because
it's another way of looking at it is less of a risk right now because when you receive Bitcoin, they come with the transaction history attached to them.
Compared to Bitcoin.
When you
100%.
receive Monero, it is legal to use Monero in this country, despite what we may think they might do, and it is legal. And when you do receive that Monero, it doesn't come without a transaction history. So there's much less risk. You're receiving a fungible asset that has no history attached to it. You're not going to get a knock on the door by the feds because the guy who paid you is using Bitcoin that was just used to, I don't know, also fund terrorism or whatever it may be, right? So with Monero, actually, there's arguments to be made that, you know, there's more safety in using it. There's less likelihood that you could get tied up in things because every time you transact, you don't have a history that follows you.
Well, that is one risk.
And we've seen very real implications of that.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin fog case. I mean, there's endless examples
so
of people.
Yeah, so it's totally fair to say that blockchain analytics are going to come with their own set of risks because you're using Bitcoin, you know, the transaction is recorded in public, but this is a different type of risk. I'm just saying, even if they can't prove that a certain transaction took place, if you're advertising that you're accepting a coin and it were to be illegal, you're taking.
But this is all assuming that it's going to, like I said, I don't think we should frame it like, oh, they might make. I get, you know, what you're saying, but I think we need to ignore that and frame it as Monero is perfectly legal because it is.
Okay,
here in the U.S.
That's completely fair.
Right.
Even in Europe, it is legal. No, and there's no, you know, they're gonna soft ban it in Europe by eliminating it from exchanges, which they effectively have already done, right? And maybe that's a soft ban they do here in the U.S., which they've done to a degree. New York has never had Monero listed on a centralized exchange ever. Since day one, you've never been able to buy Monero in New York on a centralized exchange, and to this day. I'm from New York. I might have a little Monero, I might not. But there's ways, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get your hands on it.
I just think if it becomes an actual alternative that people are using, and it's known that this is, you know, a coin that you can't trace the transactions of, it's not hard for me to imagine. Like we're in Michigan, and we go and we get milk from a local farmer, and I don't think they're ideological at all. But if I'm like, hey, you know what would be awesome? You accept this Monero, and like it's legal, but the transactions are private. I feel like that's automatically
cash, man. I'm sure they take cash. You know, I got this thing, and if I give it to you, nobody else. It's called cash.
Yeah,
that's what we got to normalize.
Okay.
Cash is perfectly
You
normal.
see what I'm saying?
And you shouldn't feel guilty accepting cash anywhere, and we need to normalize that because it always has been normal. So if we're talking about some scenario where they now make it illegal to use cash, and that you have to feel like you shouldn't be allowed to accept cash. Right?
The other thing too is that these tools are meant to be used or designed to be used in a permissionless fashion. So like, if I send Doug Monero, nobody has to know but us. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, but for adoption, like for merchant adoption.
right. Well, I mean, if I was a merchant and I was going to accept privacy coins, I mean, I wouldn't be keen to report it to anybody. You know.
I just want to say there's plenty of restaurants in New York City that are cash only, and they accept cash.
And there's a reason why they're cash only, because they're trying to not pay taxes. Right.
But it's at some point we're not going to be able to comply our way out of technocracy. People will absolutely have to resist. So we're going to have to get to the point where people are not complying and become disobedient. That's actually the only way out of it. So we need to be teaching people more, you know, not to ask for permission or forgiveness and to reclaim their own, you know, free will. I mean, that is to me really what this is all about, is about reclaiming our free will.
And that's what these tools that we're trying to teach everybody about, like Zeno and Monero and Confidential Layer and Firo and Spark Acid. That's what these things do. Freedom Dollar. They're all meant to Cake Wallet, Edge Wallet, all of them. This is what there's all of these tools are designed to empower you to live free when that day of reckoning comes that Aaron's talking about. Any more questions?
More like an addition. Even in prisons and in the German Democratic Republic in the past, there was like certain things disallowed, like drugs in prisons, for example, and they are still like used there and to get traded there. So black markets will always exist, and even in the German German Democratic Republic, they use like the currency from the West to trade things. So there will always be this niche, and with like a physical cash from another society, using that, it's more traceable or like more. It's easier to spot this than using like an app on your phone, which is not, which is designed for this scenario.
I think niche is the right word, though. So, like, are we envisioning a scenario in which we're going to be trading as individuals trade in prison, where it's a niche market, and hey, it's cool that we have this this tool that's available to us. That is cool. Or do we envision, Monero is actually going to be accepted?
XMR Bazaar.
Yeah.
So I think what you're trying to say is like, when do we reach critical mass? That's what it sounds like. Like that's kind of the question at hand.
I'm trying to figure out, are we envisioning that the future world is going to look like Monero is going to be easily acceptable at places where you can live a normal life and not just have to deal with people who are in the niche? They're in the resistance.
You could buy a house right now in Argentina on XMR Bazaar. You could buy like 400 acres of land.
But talk niche, right?
Well,
so like,
think about how many. Give it some time. It's only been around for a year, and we see
right.
multiple properties around the world.
Right.
There's only like 5 of them, but they're popping up, and they're willing to accept Monero first.
Yeah.
You could buy cheese. You could buy grass-fed meat. So we're seeing the adoption and an actual desire to use. And I think that's, to answer your question, I think that's what we need to go for, and not go for niche. Let's just use it for illegal things.
Yeah.
Let's everybody use it for everything, because we benefit when we opt out of the system and we have our own economy outside of the state surveillance system. And there's a lot of ways in which we benefit from that, and push that narrative and get as many normal people as we can to use digital cash to live off of.
So we're in a race, and I've put together this freedom index and a tyranny index. And on the tyranny index, we're at kind of DEFCON 3 with respect to digital currencies. Our money is already a central bank digital currency. Our money's already programmable. It's already trackable. Now we're moving to stable coins. And the end game is one single global currency backed by energy credits tied to this dystopian AI surveillance system and social credit system. That's what they're working on. So we have to understand that's what we're actually competing against, all of us, with all of these projects. And so where we are is, if you're using alternative currencies today, I live on crypto. I haven't had a bank account since 2019, but that involves, I'm still using crypto debit cards. I'm buying gift cards. I'm using these other services that do hook into the traditional service or traditional financial system. We want to move down to the point where we're trying to get to peer-to-peer transactions for everyone that are private. So that's the way I like to frame what this is all about in terms of tyranny versus freedom.
Okay, it is 7 minutes past 5, so we don't have a hard stop on this conversation. I'm down to keep talking if you guys are. I just wanted to give you an opportunity if people want to leave. Now's a good time so you don't miss the next thing that's going on. And then other questions.
And I know there are more questions. So,
thanks. I'm with a group that is looking to make a movie about Bitcoin's original creation, the people and the technologies that were involved in that, and the ideology, particularly Satoshi's original vision of Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer transactional system. So and it's all packaged as a mystery thriller. So my question is, what are your thoughts on using the media, like movies, to our advantage to help educate the public about these issues?
Yeah, I think it's a phenomenal idea. We need a lot of it. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. I bet crypto is the most dramatic industry of all industries. The stories of early Bitcoin are insane. The characters are absolutely insane. What happened with Ross Ulbricht was insane. It went up to the highest levels of government. So if you there is an endless number of Hollywood thrillers that are waiting to be created telling the story of Bitcoin, and then the hijacking of Bitcoin as well, which is also high drama, also goes up to, intrigue with federal agents getting involved. So yeah, I think we need it desperately. In fact, I'll just say, this Hijacking Bitcoin book came out in April of last year, 2024. I was shocked that nobody had really written this story up until 2024. The position that is articulated in the book is one that was actually the majority position up until like 2017. So like all of Bitcoiners, most Bitcoiners that were in the entire industry had this perspective, and yet this is very dramatic what happened, and nobody wrote about it from the perspective that Roger writes about in the book. So that's just the highest drama happened in 2017, so that was 8 years ago. So yeah, this is very fertile ground for exciting documentaries and thrillers and everything else.
Any other questions? Here we go.
I just want to say thank you for writing the Hijacking Bitcoin book, because I wasn't yeah, thank you. Oh my God. Yeah. Like I wasn't around during the block size war, but like reading the history, and I've read that other book too, right? It's hard to say that like 8 megabytes wasn't controversial back then, right? It was not controversial at all. We're still stuck at 4 megabytes. And here's the thing, with all the Bitcoin maximalism, I'll say BTC maximalism out there, you won't believe how many people at all these conferences, the BTC maxis, I ask, have you read the original Bitcoin white paper? It's called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And at this point, I'm like, I don't even want to have a conversation with anyone about crypto. If you've not taken the 20 minutes to read the 8-page paper, skip the equations, but like 20 minutes, how many, I'm like, how can you think you know anything about anything in this field if you've not taken 20 minutes to read originally where it came from, right? And then after that, I say, okay, now read the Hijacking Bitcoin book. And I've given out copies of the book at Christmas, right? Because it's almost like we need to know this history. And it also in the privacy, that was what happened to Bitcoin, right? And we need to know this history in the privacy space, because then we'll know what to watch out for. So reading that book, like, again, I wasn't around during that time, but seeing the history, how can you argue that this group was not DDoS attacked? Like over and over again, like we saw what happened. And the strange thing is like, well, why is BTC Core saying these strange things right now? Like on the ground, you might not have seen it, but in hindsight, I'm like, oh, they started a for-profit company called Blockstream, and oh, they're making money off of the layer one being like they took a cheap, fast international payment system that was being used in 2015 and turned it into a slow, clunky, like hard to use system. So it's sort of like for the privacy advocates out there, sorry, this is more of a comment but yeah, thank you for writing the book. And yeah, it's a lesson to all of us on what we're trying to do here today. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And I do want to say, I have learned more about the world through Bitcoin than anything else. Like I was a young, naive libertarian, and the things that I saw absolutely blew my mind. You mentioned that, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about because they haven't read the white paper. Correct. And this also goes all the way to the top of the present Bitcoin industry, the Michael Saylors of the world. Apparently, we live in a world where you can be a billionaire and you can be the Bitcoin guy, Michael Saylor, for example, and not know anything about Bitcoin. We actually live in that world. I didn't understand that 10 years ago. I would have said that's totally crazy. Obviously, you have to be an expert to know what you're talking about. But no, you get all the interviews on CNBC. Yeah, right. Cyber Hornets, the whole shebang. And so now I see that pattern everywhere. That's not just isolated to Bitcoin. That's in other industries as well. It's in other parts of life. But yes, thank you for the comment. And yeah, like I said, there are so many. Not only are there thrillers to be written, but there's also comedies to be written about what has happened in Bitcoin.
I've been asked to mention if anybody is interested in the movie that we're going to be making. Hopefully, we are showing a trailer tomorrow night, Friday at 8:30 p.m. in the Pavilion.
I'll be there.
You mentioned, thank you guys all for this. This is awesome. You mentioned that you've seen evidence or experienced that there's potential hijacking towards the privacy coins. Is that, but I haven't heard any details about what that is. Is that like towards the devs, like approaches, or what's going on there?
No, I would actually I wouldn't classify it as hijacking, but more there seems to be a coordinated effort to divide and conquer. So I would call it that for now, and not necessarily place any organized motives behind it. But I'll tell you, that has been a big part of what happened with Bitcoin. So I guess I'm sensitive to when we start to see those things happening within the privacy coin space, you wonder who's behind it and what the motivations are.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything real that we could say is happening yet, but people just need to be vigilant. I mean, I'm being accused of hijacking Monero, right? Like, so it's like, you know, it's being used against us as well, right? Because who is the hijacker, right? It's all relative. So we just need to, like I said on the outset, focus on the culture, say, you know, be in it for the right reasons, untraceable digital cash, and just be vigilant about that. And as long as everybody's, you know, for the most part, they're sticking to that narrative, I think that it really is the only way you don't get hijacked. The other thing I'd say too is from a technological standpoint, so not even just from a cultural standpoint or a social attack, there's certain things that I would say Monero has that also helps it make it be less potentially co-optable. For example, it's mined by CPUs and not ASICs. So there's no ASIC mining farms to co-op. The government can't knock on the door of the largest Bitcoin miner and say, hey, we need you to censor these transactions. There's no doors to knock on except for individuals that are mining Monero because it's all CPU mined. I'll say a second thing is Monero's tail emission. So there isn't going to be any question of whether or not we need to raise the cap. So there'll be no political situation that will happen there. Monero's dynamic block size. So there'll be no block size war because Monero has a dynamic block size that will dynamically increase as more people use it. And then obviously it's privacy tech. So it's not just social, but these things also need to be built in a way where they can't be taken over and co-opted.
Two quick things. One, if you are hijacking Monero, you would say that.
Of course.
Right? So I just want to put that out there.
It's all relative.
But also, I don't know the details of Monero and its history and its community, but I am 100% sure they're trying, okay? I don't know who the bad actors are, but they are guaranteed to be in that community trying to reach the devs. Maybe there are some compromised individuals there. That's the game that we're in the crypto world. So hopefully things are bright. And I do think the things you mentioned about there being tail emissions, it is relevant because there's an interesting question I wonder, and it pains me to wonder, which is if Bitcoin just didn't have the block size hard coded, okay, didn't have the block size limit hard coded. If we didn't have the block size war, how far could we have gone? Like, there's a story I could tell, which is that Bitcoin really doesn't need indefinite management of developers over the core protocol. That if you get a few pieces of the puzzle right, the block size scaling in a fashion that was proposed, like I think it was BIP 101 or whatever, doubling every 2 years, whatever it was. If you solved a couple of these little issues, it's possible that the social attack and the dev takeover angle might not even have been possible. That's an alternative history. I don't know. But I think it's fair to say that if Monero has solved some of those things, maybe there is less of a risk.
Yeah, and if you want to see this social attack, you could just check out my X feed and look at some of the people that are throwing me on the bus, and you can decide which one you think is the nefarious actors. I'll put it to you that way. But one of the things it looks like they're trying to do is push out good people like the devs that may have political philosophies that don't align with other political philosophies, and you have people making it to the point where they just don't want to be in the same room because the room now just stinks, and they don't want the stench of these others that are like just spewing hate and wickedness. So that's an attack too, because they'll just leave because they don't want to deal with the toxicness.
The first sign to the hijacking really was the social attacks. I was a moderator on our Bitcoin for a very long time, and they actually threw me off because I posted an interview with Roger Revere that I did in like the early days of the block size wars. That's why it's so important that we have Doug who's like sort of roots out the Monero maxis and sort of keeps them tame and calm.
Great. Any other questions?
I wonder what are your opinions about the future of BTC and BCH coins. Bitcoin is obviously hijacked, but the price is going up, still going up. And some people think that there's still hope. Somehow one way or the other is going to be salvaged. And there are forks of BTC. They kind of are the same thing. Do you see any future in them?
So we're actually going to be filming or streaming an episode of our podcast of Subversive Spectrum from this stage tomorrow night at 7:30. We're going to be giving out free Bitcoin Cash for everybody who comes. But the way I look at it is like I don't know about you guys, but I'm a peer-to-peer cash maximalist. So again, like whatever works, use it. As long as you're not using fiat currency, I'm good. I think Bitcoin Cash is a great coin. I'd like to see like base layer privacy on there, and I that's why I tell everybody to use Stack Wallet, because it's got Cash Fusion built right into it, and it for all intents and purposes it makes Bitcoin Cash anonymous. As long as the app is open, it's sort of anonymizing your funds continuously. I don't like the second layer solutions. I prefer like the base layer privacy, like Zano, Monero, Firo, but it works, and I hope that the Bitcoin Cash community adds on like a more base layer solution. You can, by the way, tokenize Bitcoin Cash. Well, you will be in about a month or two. You'll be able to tokenize Bitcoin Cash not only on confidential layer on Zano, but on Spark assets on Firo, and then you can trade it anonymously. That's not the best solution, right? You want it to be native to the chain, but the only way I know how to do that right now is by using Stack Wallet and Cash Fusion.
So I'm going to give you two answers that will explain why you shouldn't take what I say seriously at all. Okay. Answer number one, when the last BTC cycle peaked at something like it was $67,000. And I remember seeing ads with Tom Brady on the television. It was for, I don't know, it was crypto.com or one of the, was it FTX? That's ironic. So I remember thinking, this has to be the peak. Okay. Whenever you reach Tom Brady selling you crypto, that's got to be the peak of the cycle. I thought, we're not going to touch $67,000 again. It's going to go down. And I was right until it broke that. So I have no idea what the future holds for BTC. I don't even know how to make sense of BTC. I was too close to it. I don't know what the heck's going on. Could be $100,000, could be $1 million. I honestly have no idea with regards to BTC. On BCH, I want to be able to say that I'm like too jaded on Bitcoin based on what happened, but I can't say that. This is also why you shouldn't care about my answer here, because I'm still connected with some of the people that are working on Bitcoin Cash. They're working at the technical level. Some of them are old BitPay buddies. I never worked there. My wife did work there, but so I've got old friends from way back in the day who are still keeping the vision alive. Every time I talk to them, I'm like, damn, this is cool. This tech is legit. The original Bitcoin technology, it's been updated a bit. Okay, so there's cool new stuff that the OG Bitcoin didn't have, but they're doing a good job technically. So it's very hard, even though I don't know, they're probably like, What is the future price going to be? I have no idea. I want to say it's not going to work. Move on. Let's go to privacy coins. But I really do like some of the things I see with Bitcoin Cash. It has a way, it has this mixture of utility and history that's hard for me to let go of, which is, again, why you should listen to anything I just said.
I mean, I have no idea how to predict what's going to happen with any of it, because you don't know what's going on with the developer ecosystem or anything else. But I do also have an affinity for Bitcoin Cash, and not for Bitcoin.
I have a lot of friends who are like in like followers of these, and I think they understand the need for privacy, and I think that's something that they're like working on pretty hard. And I think that's kind of like the goal, from what I gather, is like to try to, like, the next upgrade is going to be more privacy focused. At least that's the hope.
So what more evidence do you need than what has happened to say that the technology maybe doesn't really matter with regards to price? Like, BTC technology is pretty much the worst that there is. Virtually every other project, not including silly speculative ones, they have better tech, but clearly that doesn't seem to work, right? That's not enough. That's not a strong enough pitch. And I can't get that through my own head, because it's like, no, but look at the fundamentals. You got to look at the fundamental analysis, but who cares?
It's sort of like the same reason why a Model T costs so much money, right? Like it's like the old, it doesn't really work. You're not gonna like use it as your family car, but like if you're gonna buy one, you're gonna spend a good price on it. So
I see we still have some questions. Okay.
Just to add to what you just said about technology not mattering for price, Litecoin actually did add privacy, did not matter for price at all.
yeah, it didn't matter yet. But again, as the state becomes more and more oppressive, the need for privacy is the demand will increase. And like, what did the Austrians, the monetary theory, like you need this non-monetary use case that is so widely demanded that it creates what Mises called a universal demand. And once everybody wants that commodity, then it can be much more easily tradable. And I think that's what's going to happen as the state becomes more and more oppressive. As they get deeper into this liquidity trap, they're going to become more and more, the scrutiny, the financial spying is going to become so intense that people will have no choice but to use privacy coins. And that's when I think we're going to reach that critical mass that we're hoping for.
Any other questions?
I mean, I'm never a fan of working within the law. I'm an agorist, so like as far as I'm concerned, it's just once you've asked the state for like special privileges, you've already lost the battle at that point.
Yeah, Monero, obviously the culture is, free open source software and licensing that, anybody can use, and trying to make things as open source as possible, and really not have any entity that's a legal entity that's associated with the protocol or development at all. That's one of the major differences between Monero and say something like Zcash, which, by the way, kudos to Zcash as well. That's another privacy tech coin that I would applaud for as well in terms of things they've done for privacy tech. People think I'm out here and I like hate Zcash. No, I respect them as well. Like Monero wouldn't be racing to implement full chain membership proofs if it wasn't for competing against Zcash's Halo, right? So I respect that as well. But I would say from Monero's standpoint, always just trying to be as idealistic in terms of being free open source software and to not have any legal entities involved at all.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to defeat the state using the state's own legal apparatus.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's probably a strategy that should be considered. So I think both. So you need, I think for, Monero and hardcore privacy coins, that's going to be a hard sell to like set up the Monero Institute TM that has some rights over the software. But for other projects, I think it's worth, you know, people have experimented here. I think it's worth trying out. There's a lot of space for. Well, yeah, in Monero's case, definitely don't do that with Monero. That's not going to work. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Got more of a comment than a question, but so 8 years ago now, I guess, was the fork. But 8 years ago, we took the best payment network that was ever existed, which is Bitcoin. We made it slower and we made it more expensive. And why did we do this? We did this so that people can run their own nodes on a Raspberry Pi at home. And here we are 8 years later, literally nobody runs a Bitcoin node. Nobody runs a Bitcoin Cash node either, to be honest with you. So why did we do this? Why did we take the best payment network ever where you could send millions of dollars all the way to China in just a few minutes for just a few pennies, so nobody can stop it? We did this so people could run a Raspberry Pi node at their home, and nobody is running a Raspberry Pi node today. Nobody runs a Bitcoin node. I talk to people all over the country going to these events. No node. So why did we do this?
I would say, like, the thing is, like, so it's two different philosophies. In Bitcoin, they think everybody, you know, needs to run their own node for, you know, decentralization, and it's all bullshit. In Bitcoin Cash, it's a little bit different. The idea is that, you know, as merchants adopt it, the idea is you want to be an efficient medium of exchange. So if you can be an efficient medium of exchange and you can encourage retail adoption, and then merchants will be incentivized to validate their own transactions, blah, 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 blah. But that's sort of, it's two different philosophies there. That's all I'm saying. But you're not wrong. They're not, we don't, you know, it's not being as widely used as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, that question hurts my soul. Like, why did we do this? There's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of money involved. I think ultimately the project was deliberately hijacked. That's why it happened. And a lot of people got. So this is actually relevant to talk that I'm going to be giving tomorrow on a dark age hypothesis. And I don't want to give too many of the details away. It's at 6 p.m. It's going to be, I think we've been living it. Not tomorrow night. So you guys are probably in agreement that at present, kind of going through some expert crisis. Like there's our institutions are failing. We don't know who to trust. The experts say things and then other experts contradict them. And it's like, you have to think for yourself, but like, how are you supposed to sort through what's going on? Very complex and messy. Same thing happened in Bitcoin, where most people did not take the time to do their own research on whether or not the arguments actually checked out that the BTC small block or maxi folks were making. If they had done that, we wouldn't be in this situation because the arguments don't work. They don't actually make sense. Sorry. It's such a weird, sorry, I'm going to be bitter and angry. Yeah, come to this talk. It's such a weird situation to be in 2025. Be like desperately trying to make these arguments 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. They're like, look here, listen to, I'm not a technical, I've never called myself a technical guy, but relative to the other people who are making technical claims, I can say a couple of things. What the small blockers were saying was technically really bad. Okay, just an objective fact when you looked at it. And yet, for social reasons, apparently a lot of people couldn't discern this. And they were trying to say, I have had so many conversations over the years, in private, some in public, but many in private, people that you would know, who will publicly say they're supporting, you know, BTC, they're totally on board with Bitcoin. And then in private, they would share concerns about, well, I don't really know what's going on with the block size limit. I don't really know what these developers are doing. I totally agree with, like, in theory, the big block thing totally makes sense, but like, surely I'm confused. I'm not a technical expert. We're just going to defer to the experts, which is the Bitcoin core developers. Yeah, well, yeah, who are they exactly? So I have learned that your question is very good. Why did it happen? Why did we do this? Well, I think we deferred to experts that were either confused or lying to us. And that's why we're in the situation we're in today. And it's not just with Bitcoin. This is also the case, I think, widespread in our society. We're doing the exact same thing. We're deferring to experts that are either profoundly confused or lying to us.
Any other questions? All right, great. Well, if we want to wrap it up, if everybody wants to just give some closing remarks, and then we'll close this out.
Thanks for sticking around, guys. Great talking with you. Feels good to get this off my chest. True story. Did most of the writing for Hijacking Bitcoin with Roger. And part of the motivation for me personally in writing the book was to be done with crypto. So I had, like I said, your question hurt my soul. And I was like, okay, I wanted to leave crypto a while ago because I was like, what is going on? This is a game. This is silly. People are silly. I'm not doing this. It's too stressful. And I thought, I can't leave because this is really important information. Somehow the story of Bitcoin hasn't been told. Like this was this incredible thing that we had and it got perverted and corrupted. So I felt like I want to write the book and then leave. So thank you for inviting me to talk, and you draw me right back in, and I can't leave dang crypto. I still have the goal to be like, look, I'm done with it, but I can't quite get it over. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Did you ever see Al Pacino? Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. I'm Sal Mayweather, guys. Thanks for coming. We're here tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be live streaming an episode of the show. So if you're around, we're going to be giving out some free crypto and just generally kind of doing what we did here tonight and having a good time. So stop by.
Steve, thank you for coming. Actually, thank the whole panel for this. I think this was a great opportunity to discuss. A great opportunity to discuss an important topic, and I also want to shill something. My son is selling cookies back there. It looks like he only has 2 left, so
let's go.
2 left. So let's do that. And also, I believe there's free beer outside. So if you want to stick around and continue talking about these things,
see ya.
This is where it's at. I'll be talking about CBDCs and stablecoins tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the Pavilion. And so, thank you for coming.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. At Douglas Tuman on X. I run a Monerotopia show every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. I also have the Monero Talk YouTube channel. I have a Monero Nodo hooked up outside where I'm selling coffee. If you want to come check it out, it's a way to easily run your own Monero node at home on a dedicated device. And yeah, I'm going to be giving a talk on Saturday, mostly talking about Monero and probably XMR Bazaar. Thank you all.